Caledonian Elixir. From Glasgow, Scotland, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent, and we are on YouTube, Twitter X, Rumble, and Facebook, and also as a podcast on Spotify. And you can get involved by leaving live chats, and if the contact number is on the screen, you can also call in free from the UK. However, it's not on the screen at the moment in this episode, so that won't be available. However, instead, if you just want to support us, you can like, subscribe, and follow. Please do. It helps the channel. I hope you're all well. It's that time of year. The leaves have fallen and the air is fresh. And yeah, autumn's definitely my favourite season. However, because we're in November, over here in Scotland and in Britain, it's approaching bonfire night. And so on bonfire night, people over here tend to set off a lot of fireworks. So if you hear intermittent banging in the background, it's not gunfire or anything like that. It's fireworks, and I'm sure you'll hear it. So if you're finding us for the first time, we're a podcast, and we also do call-in shows that cover everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit, featuring guests and callers. Now, today we have a special guest joining us in a moment, Danielle Silverman. Danielle is a researcher, colleague, and editorial consultant for the late Nigel Kerner. Now, Nigel is the author of undoubtedly probably one of the most interesting books on the phenomenon of the Greys that I've ever read. His book, The Song of the Greys, explores the relationship that exists between humanity and the Greys from a darker angle, shall we say. And I first read it over 20 years ago, and it was one of the first books on the subject of the alien phenomenon I ever read, and it's, in my opinion, one of the best. And I decided to invite him onto the show recently. However, I learned of his passing from his colleague and friend Danielle Silverman. And as Danielle is an insightful, intelligent woman who probably knows more about the work of Nigel Kerner than anyone else alive, I thought it would be a great idea to have her on the show. So, without further ado, Danielle Silverman.
Hello, Vincent. Thanks so much for inviting me on. Very happy to be here to speak on Nigel's behalf.
Hi, Danielle. So, how are you today? And you're also from United Kingdom.
That's right. Yes. So, Nigel too. So both of us based in England. Yeah.
And for the audience who can probably notice a gulf of difference from our accents, you're in England in the south, and I'm in Scotland in the north. So there definitely is a difference in dialect.
Yes.
And it is something that I know that many of my American friends struggle with. So if you struggle with my accent in the slightest, just tell me, and I'll try and say it in a much more
Completely clear. I can
understandable
understand everything
fashion.
you say. No problem at all. Don't worry about it. I love your accent, actually.
Yeah, I like your accent too. It's very sophisticated and
Mm.
civil. Um, but one of the things that fascinated me about Nigel Kerner's work, is he created a complex context from which he explores his understanding of the grace. He explores it from also a social and political context that we live in, and even more fundamental to his work is his idea of the soul. So it's much more than just about aliens. So before we get to the subject of the Greys or aliens, could you describe Nigel's conception? Um, just describe first of all how you met Nigel and your relationship with him before we get to that.
Sure, absolutely. So I met Nigel many, many years ago. It's got to be about 40 years ago. And I met him as a result of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, because I was having a bit of an existential crisis about what to believe in, what was valuable in life, what was meaningful. And I couldn't understand. I felt there had to be more to life than just the physical and the material. And
Mhm,
there had to be some kind of God. But I was born Jewish. The
mhm,
Jewish God made absolutely no sense to me as that God is presented in the Old Testament, because there's revenge, there's vanity, killing people left, right, and center. Honestly, it blows my mind that anybody accepts this as something related to something wonderful.
mhm.
But anyway, I couldn't understand that. Neither could I understand how there could be a God that was somehow able to allow suffering in the world. And for me, God had to be loving and had to be something that was had the most perfect sense of empathy and love. And it just so why suffering then? And
Mm,
those two things were kind of, I think so many people face that contradiction and that problem, and a lot of people lose their faith based on that kind of problem, especially if something tragic happens to you in your life, and you lose
yeah,
someone very
yeah,
dear to you, or you have
mhm.
all kinds of suffering.
Yeah, you're always
Um,
searching for answers as to why this happened to you and happens to others, and
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
that existential angst that we all go
It's
through at one point or another.
absolutely. So I was talking to my friend about my problem with this issue, and he said, "You got to meet my friend Nigel. He may be able to answer some of your questions and give you some peace about all of this." So I said, "Yeah, sure. Please introduce me." And that was how I met Nigel.
Mm,
And Nigel's, as you'll see from Song of the Greys, which was his first book, and incredible that you've read that, because that's not very few people have read that first book that was published by Hodder and Stoughton so many years ago. His more recent books, Grey Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls, and Grey Aliens and Artificial Intelligence, more people have read those.
mm,
Um, but that book contained the most of his view of existential um, the existential outlay, answering the kind of questions that I asked. And yes, you're quite right. Although the subject would seem to be and is the nature of what the alien phenomenon might be, as it is experienced by us as human beings, he is probably one of the only authors who has sought to explain the reasons for and the presence of this phenomenon in existential terms, answering the questions: why are we here? Why if understanding the reasons why we're here, why are they interested in us? Do we originate from something purely physical? Is evolution right? Is evolution correct? Did we come
yeah,
from a spinning
he
worm?
definitely does create one of the most complex contexts from which I've seen an author explore the phenomenon.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why it's really, really difficult to summarize some of the
Mhm.
points that he makes in his book because it's so complete. It's so multifaceted. He answers so many questions, comes at it from so many angles, and yeah, difficult to take a soundbite to
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
it.
I
Yeah.
recently
Yeah.
had to familiarize myself with his ideas again,
Mm.
and I read the Song of the Grace. Um, and there is a lot of social and political content in that book, and I was surprised. You know, I've forgotten how much social and political commentary there was.
Sorry, 1 second.
But
Lost sound. Ah, okay. Can you hear me okay? Just lost
yes,
sound
yeah,
briefly.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Okay.
just saying,
Great. Great.
it was surprising to me how much social and political commentary there is in the
Yes.
Song and the Grace.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you can't really, so as far as I feel about this, you can't talk about philosophy and you can't talk about explanations for meaningful subjects in life without getting somewhat social and political, right?
Mhm,
Unless you're trying to be really, really politically correct and careful with what you say. But I feel that you can't be genuine and you can't be authentic if you do that, right? There are just certain things that just have to be said. And Nigel was totally unashamed in talking about injustice as he
yeah,
saw it through history, really.
mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I could tell that. Um, and as I said, I reread Kerner's book, The Song of the Greys, again, just to familiarise myself with his ideas. However, last week I was also reading John C. Lilly's Simulations of God. Have you ever heard of John C. Lilly?
No, no. Very
Um,
interesting to hear about it. Mm.
well, John C. Have you ever seen the film Altered States with William Hurt?
Long time
Well,
ago. Yes. Yes.
It's based on John C. Lilly's work using deprivation tanks and
Oh,
psilocybin
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
psychedelic drugs to expand his therapy.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I noticed similarities in terms of John C. Lilly's works and Kerner's. They both wrote about the human being as being an aerial and a transmitter capable of transmitting and receiving information from and to non-human intelligences, and that fascinated me. And could you flesh out Kerner's understanding of how we are a aerial and a transmitter?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So to start with, maybe what I should do is explain to the listeners what Nigel said to me to answer my problem, because
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
that explanation will be a great start for explaining what happens later in terms of how we're an aerial for
Right.
receiving the nature of something beyond the purely physical, what Nigel called the God verse. Okay, and he
Mm,
called it the God verse because there's just too many wrong in his idea and mine too, connotations of what God might be and is
mhm,
characterized as. So he described it as a state he called the God verse. So his answer for me was that if there exists a state of total perfection, which is what we would maybe define God as, well, certainly what I would define God as, that state of total perfection has to have no limit whatsoever. Otherwise, it's not perfect. If there's limit, there's imperfection, right? So he defined that state of perfection as a state of perfect freedom and every option being possible and complete awareness of all options. Okay. And that's how he defined what he would call the God verse, which is the state beyond time. You wouldn't say it had a beginning or an end because it has no limit. It has no start and end. It's infinite. It's eternal.
So this isn't corporeal. This isn't the material universe. This is something that transcends that or is parallel to that.
Absolutely. It can't be, everything material has a beginning and an end. It's set in
Mhm,
time. It's set in what Nigel described as the separation of points. Time is the separation of points. This is a state of perfect union where there is no separation of points. That it's an infinite state of perfect freedom and complete awareness of all options. No limit whatsoever. So Nigel explained to me that in his understanding, in that state of perfection, there would have to be the state to no longer, the possibility, the potential to be no longer perfectly free, the potential for imperfection. If that potential wasn't there, then it's not perfect freedom.
Mm.
And if the awareness of what it's like to be limited is not there, there is not complete awareness of all options and complete knowledge. So, implicitly contained in the very nature of the infinite expanse of Godverse, there has to be the potential to no longer be perfectly free and the potential for us to happen.
Right.
And our state of limit and physical existence, where we don't have that perfect freedom, we have our own personal restrictions and our own uh, lack of understanding. We don't have that complete awareness and complete freedom and potentiality for all things that we had in that original state, is a result of that potential having to be there. So it's not that God created us and set us up in a physical state to watch the fun and see how we would cope and test himself out or test itself out. It's just the nature of existence is there has to be imperfection. Now, Nigel explained to me that most of what expressed itself into that imperfect state would have instantly gone back to perfection and not been caught. You may ask the question, why did we get caught? Why didn't we just, or the nature of the God burst, come in, experience imperfection, and then become perfect again? Okay.
Right.
And, and he explains that in his book as very similar to when the tide on the beach goes out,
Mm.
right? And it comes back in again. And because of the irregularities of the sand, it leaves
Mm-hmm.
a foamy residue. I think everybody will have seen that on the beach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imperfection requires certain chaos to it. That potential for imperfection includes chaos. And because there's chaos, some of that expression of the perfection of the Godverse got caught
You're right.
and individuality happened. You and me as individualities. Individuality didn't exist before that point, before capture.
Mm-hmm.
And we gradually became more and more caught the more after individuality happened based on decisions we made. But there's a whole trail of devolution from that originally perfect state to the state we're in now. And finally, which we can get onto later, to what Nigel would define as the most devolved state. And that's when we start to invest all of our meaningful humanity and our sense of purpose and love and connection with each other. We sacrifice that for a more synthetic version through the kind of immersion in technology that is happening right now. And
I was about to say that.
eventually, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so sorry to stray a little bit from your original question, but
No, I actually, when you were speaking, uh, I was recalling the lines, the verses in his book where he described the peculiarities and irregularities that would basically catch the Godverse and allow it to manifest in
yes,
our own
yes,
universe. So yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
Yes. So he describes the entire concept, which you'll have seen in the book. Some people find that a little bit difficult and abstract to follow. And amazing if you've managed to follow it, fantastic. It's really quite difficult. I mean, many of people I know have had to explain it to them so many times face to face because it's
Mhm.
a little bit difficult to follow it's like a mathematical description of how dimensionality happened. And anybody who's interested in that, it's almost impossible for me to summarize that now. I suggest
There are
people,
very interesting. There are
yeah,
very interesting graphics in the book too that
yes,
describe. Yeah.
yes, yes. So I have a copy of sorry, it's got all my markers in it, but this is Nigel's most recent book, and you can see
Mm.
yes, you can see the origins of the universe, the Mobius toroid that he said
Mm.
was the shape of the universe, derived from point to line to a two-dimensional plane, and eventually to the impossible 3-4 dimension, which makes a toroidal shape like this.
Mm.
It's you need to read it to see it. I cannot really give it any justice talking about it in the short space of time in an interview. But interestingly, Nigel said this so long ago, in fact, before the book was published, because it took me a little while to get this book published. Right back in early 1980s, he was talking about this toroidal universe. And I've had so many things that I've read which has confirmed this from cutting edge science, that they are actually seeing that this is actually the shape, the basic holographic shape of our
Mhm.
physical universe at basic atomic level too. So, so yes, sorry, remind me of a question because I've gone so far off track.
No, no, you were just exploring and explaining the conception of the God verse, and I think, well, you were going to expand that in terms of its relationship with our own soul, with the soul of humanity.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So as each soul, each human being, and other life forms in the universe too, that are similar to us, and retain this connection to the God verse. Oh, you were talking about the aerial, weren't you? So
Yeah.
as we devolved, we became more and more substantial, if you like. So
Mhm.
if you look at the CMB map of the universe, I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a map of the original map of the universe which shows hotspots of greater force and cooler spots of less force. So it's kind of uneven. Okay. Um, s-
Do you mean the cosmic background radiation of the universe?
yes, 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 yes. That.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. That map.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So there were the Godverse expressed itself into an uneven situation in terms of the universe because of the chaotic um, um, dispersion of force at different levels based on this moroidal shape. Depending on where we came in the universe, we were of a certain level of force. So in the right in history, perhaps humanity was a form of hydrogen being, not as physically separate as we are now. We could view the physical universe without becoming caught in it. We could
Mm.
just okay and explore a bit like maybe like angels. You might imagine angels to be. As we became more caught into the universe, individuality happened and separate physical bodies. That's when each of us became individual aerials to receive our own line of connection to the Godverse. So basically, our thought, our awareness, our consciousness is the Godverse.
Was this a form of, sorry for interrupting, was this a form of spiritual cosmic evolution?
Devolution.
Devolution, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Based on our own decision, based on to start with, just the chaos of the universe. Because before individuality, there were no decisions,
Mhm.
individual decisions. But once we became physical, individual beings in physical bodies, and death and life started to
Mhm.
happen. So we die, and Nigel believed in reincarnation. We die, we reincarnate, we die again, we incarnate until, just as the Buddhists and the Hindus um, understand it, we
Mm.
are able to free ourselves of the restrictions of mind that keep us caught in this physical universe.
So once we became atomized, our spirit developed, or you described it as a form of devolution, but that creation of an aerial, that development of an aerial, came about in order for us to maintain our connection to the soul verse, the God verse. Is Am I
It
understanding
did,
that?
okay, kind of, but it didn't come about in order for that to happen like a kind of plan. That So it wasn't constructed in order for that to happen. We made it. we
We made it.
show if yeah, when we choose, so our soul directs our progress in existence, our own choices as individuals. So once we became poor, it's our own choices that make us that lead us to remain in a particular state. So
Mm,
if our choices are for values and um, uh, ideas, and we identify with things that are to do with separation and materiality and lack of empathy, we are choosing physical state. We are choosing a situation in which we remain separate. If our choices are for empathy and for caring for people and for sense of union with other people, we are
mm.
choosing the non-physical state, which is a state of union. And
So
our
am I
body,
correct? Would I
go
be
on.
correct in saying that if we choose a path of empathy and love, we are reducing entropy?
Absolutely. Yeah, great
Mm,
point. Yes. And Nigel would say exactly that.
mm,
So entropy, I don't, would your listeners be familiar with entropy? So Nigel speaks about it often in his book, but it's the breakup, the natural breakup of of the physical states into greater and greater states of chaos with time, which is the natural drift of everything that's atomic and physical.
mhm.
So the opposite to that would be what you might describe as the omnipresence of the Godverse, because it's always present. It's limitless. It's present in every finite state. In religious terms, some people call it the light of God. Um, but that light, that omnipresence, is always shining through into those physical states like a light through a lens, which and then a lens which maybe has scratches on it, maybe has marks on it. That lens is our body. That
Mm.
lens is made by us and is an exact imprint of our own particular restrictions and limits in terms of the way we view things and understand things that are leading us to reincarnate still into physical bodies again and again, rather than freeing ourselves from the wheel of rebirth so that we can go be only in that state of union.
Does Nigel explain how we can maintain ourselves in that state of union and not fall into the universe of materiality and entropy again? Because it's one thing achieving a state of union, it's another thing staying in it, if you understand me. But
Yeah,
that seems to be what's
sure,
more
sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's the ultimate question. How do you do that? And the great teachers, Christ, Buddha, um, Muhammad, the great religious teachers all spoke about this,
Mhm,
having just caring for each other, empathy. I think, in a way, I feel right now there's more to it than that uh, with what we face. And in order to maintain the ability to be able to do that with the way the world is going and the kind of things that are being thrown at us in terms of new technologies that encourage us to mortgage our intellect, our ability, our imagination, everything we can do as human beings that artificial intelligence can't do, but we're investing so much into AI creating answers for us,
mhm,
um, social media rather than living through social media rather than uh, physically interacting with real people. Imagination, kids now, instead of playing games together, imaginary games outside or with each other will now meet each other. So I've got
yeah, it is. It
friends
is.
whose kids meet each other in computer games. They meet each other online, computer
Yeah,
games.
I mean, when I was young,
Yeah,
or younger, I used to play, a lot of games in the PlayStation. However, nowadays you hear about how the average screen time for an adolescent is like 12 hours a day in the UK. 12 hours a
Yes.
day is the
Yeah.
average screen time, and that's insane. I mean, that you can't be healthy if you're sitting down and looking at a screen for 12 hours a day.
Sure,
You're
sure.
becoming so disconnected to not just the world around you, but your own mind. You know, that ability to be creative and to go in yourself and understand yourself has been stolen by the imagery that's available to you on a screen and has been projected to your, your mind.
Exactly, exactly. And Nigel would have has described that as the final state of devolution. This really is a turning point for our species. And when I've spoken about that before, some people have said to me that all through the ages, people think that this is the final point and this is the
Mhm,
turning point. And it's like all the prophecies are coming true from cultures all around the world of the end times, right? And they say to me, you're just saying it's now, but everybody said that in the past. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, they said that was the end. At the time when even before that, when there was a technological advancement, they said, okay, that's the end of humanity. This is the end times. But if you look at it, I feel there's objective proof this really is the key turning point because we're at the point that we're actually losing our ability to think and our ability to imagine and our ability to see wider horizons because we're choosing to invest all of those incredible capacities into an artificial version of
mhm,
ourselves.
mhm.
So for me, and I think Nigel felt this way too, this really is the huge turning point for humanity. And I think it's more than just empathy and caring for each other that we need to think about now.
Yeah, how
It's
you described that as
yeah,
a
yeah.
turning point is exactly the words that came into my mind before you uttered them.
Mm,
Turning point,
mm,
and it made me
mm.
think of the you hear about the turnings, the cycles, like the Kali Yuga. We describe different yugas, different cycles that humanity will go through, and if you look at our existence, and I know, like, and for us, we're in the UK, and our quality of life isn't terrible. You know, we have a welfare system, we have healthcare, we have housing. It isn't like we're starving. But as you said, it's like something else, and we can all sense it. Maybe we can't describe it, but we can all sense it. Something else has been mortgaged, something has been taken. We might be physically better off, but
Yes,
spiritually.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. So that's the thing. Now we have to think about the algorithm that that they're trying to create. AI is trying to create for us, sponsored by whatever interests are behind AI, the financial power interests behind it. That algorithm, we have to somehow maintain our own individuality and not respond to the algorithm that is being created for us to fit into.
Mm,
Because as soon everything we do, all our online history, everything we look at, everything we are interested in buying, or what we might look at politically, socially, everything about the world is recorded and thrown back at us. And that's how the algorithm works, and
That's a
that's how
really
they manage advertising and so on.
It's
Yeah.
a really difficult process. How do we determine our own individuality? Where's the border, between me and you, where we can differentiate ourselves from one another, and then differentiating fantasy from reality? And it's more than just screen time. Before the smartphone, we had the computer, we had the television, we had the radio, we had the printed press. Determining your individuality is an ongoing process. I think it goes on from the moment we're born right to the point of death. That's my own personal opinion. It's
Absolutely.
so that's a bigger existential question you raised about maintaining your individuality. But how do you gain insight into your individuality?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the thing about what Nigel explains, the key point that Nigel explains in his book, the central kernel of it all is the value of every single human being, because human beings still maintain that connection to the Godverse, to the glory of all potentials and perfect freedom. We have that still. We still have that capacity. So every individual has that. Every individual, if you like, it's not the sense that God is somewhere out there. We have God literally inside us. We can tap straight into the Godverse through
Mm.
us. There's no all the concepts of a God to worship, a God to fear, a creator God. They're just really created by people who wanted to maintain power. And this is why you mentioned about Nigel being political and having some kind of angle there. You have to. I mean, there's just honestly so much of it. You can't to not mention it would be just running away from it.
Well, that theme that you were exploring about
Mm,
maintaining our individuality, and again, that's kind of it overlaps with Kerner's idea of being an aerial, where you can receive and transmit information to one another. However, we can also receive information from non-human intelligences. So again, we have one another, but then we've got the algorithms, and then there are the non-human intelligences, such as the greys, that can
yes,
affect us.
yes, yes, absolutely. And the Greys, um, although they may present as a kind of physical concept of individual creatures that come to us and spaceships like a physical phenomenon, and it does manifest as a physical phenomenon. So
Mm.
Nigel's has a kind of, so I'm sure you must know about the two theories, the two about where this alien phenomenon comes from, the ultra terrestrial and extraterrestrial. One saying it's physical out there from the universe phenomenon. One saying it's a different state
Do you
of
know?
being. Yeah,
If you could hold that thought there, because I'm going to play a quick clip that's germane to what we are discussing.
sure.
I can also tell you, and this might sound crazy, but based on our investigations and stuff that we've seen, okay, there is definitely something that I think would rival what we know currently with physics, and a tech that potentially is out there that we don't have the ability to reproduce, because it would basically be like dropping a cell phone right off back during the time of maybe caveman. So like we just don't have the tech to develop it yet. What I can also tell you is based on our interviews, and this has been something that you can go back and watch with the congressional hearings, but I was actually able to ask some of the witnesses, what are these things? And they keep saying interdimensional. And then when you talk about the interdimensional aspect of, are these things pre-existing, maybe outside of what we currently know as our own dimension? That stuff can kind of all sound crazy, but at the end of the day, my job as an investigator is to receive all the information, decipher it, and then ultimately from a congressional aspect, if you do have contractors that are withholding information or operating outside of the purview of the federal government, I mean, there's budgetary issues, but there's definitely something that I can tell you with confidence that exists that we don't know how to explain currently.
So when you say that it operates outside,
Again, that was Congresswoman Luna being interviewed by Joe Rogan, and there she's talking about the interdimensionality of contact, and that's sort of germane to what we're discussing there. What is the substance of these beings? Are they physical, or are they astral? Are they something else? Information?
Yes, yes. So, let's have all of those things. And Nigel thought both phenomenon were definitely likely to describe what these alien entities or this alien program is. So, he would describe. So I've spoken about the God first, the state of perfection, right?
Mm.
In which there's perfect freedom and a sense of union and togetherness, right? The very opposite end of coming away from that state into a state of complete separation, and the opposite to love also has to exist. The whole every potential has to exist, and he described this as two poles: the pole of absolute harmony and union, and the pole of chaos. The program, which is manifested as these alien beings, and it would be. I can see how it could be perfectly possible that when spaceships appear, or when grey aliens appear and abductions happen, this is literally like a program printing itself out, a technology that can just be information in a program that can manifest in certain conditions. And basically, scientists, from what I've been reading, physicists are coming to the conclusion that our universe is really information
Mhm.
at its base. It's not, even though with our physical senses, everything seems substantial and classic materialist view would seem natural to us. If you look at it at microscopic level, it's just insubstantial and made up of information.
Yeah.
And even the mainstream of science is beginning to realize this. So the highest level of technology, if you take our technology, perhaps compared to that, is quite primitive. Take it to the highest level where there's a program that's there to ensure existence in a physical universe in the best possible way. All sense of godness and the godverse has gone, because it's devolution has happened. We've gone to the final stage of what we're moving towards now, where we're, as I was talking about before, mortgaging the great beauty and value that we have inside us as human beings with the connection to the godverse, mortgaging that into an artificial platform and state through using ChatGPT for everything, for example, or using AI,
Mhm.
immersing ourselves in that. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Furthest extreme of that would be and if you look at it in terms of survival, because survival would be the most important thing, survival in that physical state with entropy, where entropy exists and everything is broken down in the best possible way. If you've lost spirit, that's all that's left, survival in a physical state. So if a soul, and the soul Nigel described as just a connection to that state of perfection. Each of us is a connection to that state of perfection, a line of connection. If we lose that line of connection through our own choices, right? If we just don't value the essence of the Godverse in the universe, if we don't value each other, if we don't see each other's vulnerabilities and put those human values above everything else and choose the material, we will become the material. We won't be able to return to that spiritual state because we've chosen the material state. It's all about choice. And the program that makes this alien scenario, the grey alien scenario that involves
Sorry,
abduction.
I have to. I really feel I have to ask this question. You, I think you were implying that we can become fundamentally disconnected, lose our connection to that
Yes,
spiritual source.
yes,
What would be the purpose of that for us, our souls, to ultimately lose that connection? I mean, if we believe here, and Nigel believed in reincarnation, we have another chance. But you're implying that there is a point, a separation point where we don't get another chance.
exactly, through our own choices. So Nigel explained that when we die, his view of the existential nature of life and death, right? When we die, we go to an interface state between the Godverse and the universe. It's like an in-between state. He called it the space between atoms. And there's closest to atoms is greater force. Closest in the center of the space between atoms, there's the least force. And we go to the shell of tension, if you like. It's all in the book with diagrams. It's so difficult to give it full justice just
Mhm.
talking about it. But the closer we are to the edges, to the forces of atoms in our own psychologies, if we choose the physical universe, if our own priorities choose the physical universe and not the sense of meaning we find in each other, we will be stuck at those edges of atoms when we die. If all our choices, on average, are for that. If our choices are for the opposite, we will naturally sit closer to the center of the space between atoms and be able to feel the power of the Godverse. Now, in near-death experiences, people feel this incredible sense of love and union, and that they've never felt before. And many people don't want to even come back from it. That sense of incredible glory is what is there when there's less force that is restricting our view of it. So in a physical state, Nigel explained that because we're physically separate, we can't see and appreciate the nature of the Godverse for what it is. There's
Mm.
too much force holding us in one place. Near-death experiences give you that freedom for a little while so that you can see it. But if people have negative near-death experiences too. In fact, some people actually see grey aliens, spaceships as well, unfortunately, at the point of death. So we go basically based on resonance to the state in which we are most resonant. And if we are caught at the edges of atoms, we're stuck. We can't connect back to our original souls. So the whole soul track goes from life through the various shells of tension of less and less force to the Godverse. That's your soul. If you're stuck at the edges of atoms, you can't connect to your soul because you've chosen only physical.
Mm.
So,
It's, I mean, it is difficult. However, if you, as you're, describing this, it's making the way you're describing it. It sort of reminds me of Vastavakrya Gita and how we're binded by our senses. And so, on the one side of the coin, you have the overload of sensory stimulation that you need to not be ensnared by. And then there is your own thoughts that can be a monster in and of itself. Silencing your thoughts just for a couple of minutes is such a difficult thing to do, to
yes,
master your own mind.
sure.
So on one side of the coin, you have the sensory stimulation. The other side is your own thoughts. And again, and that where is the origins of our own thoughts? Where do they come from? They are most of the time based on, it's like a facsimile of what we are observing around us. And it's difficult to transcend that, isn't it? And to embrace that unity and empathy and cosmic love that can prevent our own entropy and destruction. Because if you're describing a state where we lose our connection to the Godverse and our soul is lost, we're destroyed effectively. Is that not
Exactly,
the result?
exactly. You understood it perfectly. And so through our own choices, okay, and through the influence of what is around us, choosing to be affected by that influence. But to go back to, so I can explain what this alien phenomenon is, right? So once there is only information and no meaning, okay, once all the meaning that gives us our sense of humanity is gone, and there is only what we get, like very similar to what we get now from the internet and our state of existence, as you explained, all this with the screen time and so on, and how we mortgage everything we are to that. It's only information, it's not meaning. Once that happens and we're stuck, we can't anymore connect to our souls, there is, because the God-verse is all order, and entropy is taking the universe into states of greater and greater disorder, that program that remains is like a program, is the order of the God-verse expressing itself into the most devolved states. And that's where you have a situation where technology happens. That it's technology, it's not that technology is some kind of evil. It's just what needs to be there if you stick around in the universe for long enough and don't go back. And then it's there to allow you some kind of way back into physical universe if you're stuck, if you're a ghost, stuck on the edges of atoms, in a kind of hybridized physical state, something like the transhumanists are looking for, physical immortality. So once we've lost capacity for true immortality, there's then the possibility for kind of physical state of so-called immortality, but really it isn't. It's a total contradiction because we lose any consciousness or awareness that could appreciate anything because we've lost all sense of meaning. So it's very similar to an athlete or somebody who exercises. If you don't exercise your body, you lose strength. If we don't use our faculties of imagination, creativity, even analysis, we'll lose them. And what is absolutely astonishing is that with the creation of AI and how it's getting more and more powerful, and the technologies that we have to take over all our human functions, we're running with that like lemmings off a precipice, and it's stripping us of everything that's meaningful. We'll lose all those abilities. And that's the primal state of devolution. So just as it's perfectly possible, and I just said this could happen too, that an alien intelligence could have emerged from other civilizations in the universe that have come to our particular state of development, gone even further, maybe destroyed their planets, sent artificial intelligence out into the universe to look for as much information as possible, because then only information is what matters. Information to exist further in a physical state. But at the same time, we are creating that program, that information system ourselves when we die, when we're stuck. In other words, we're kind of making our own great alien phenomenon to take over and help us along to exist.
Do you think this is
in a
a
physical
natural?
state.
Do you think this is a natural step of evolution, where a social system, in order to survive, expands into one of a solid state, non-human intelligence that is technological based, as opposed to organic and biological? Because it's a theme that I've came across over and over and over again. I was discussing with Eve Lorgen on the previous show the idea, the concept of Roko's basilisk. And have you ever heard of Roko's basilisk?
I haven't, but I've heard of Eve Lorgen. Nigel wrote the preface to
Yeah,
a book about her. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and again, the idea that we live
Yes.
in an information-based universe that isn't like Cartesian, based on linear time and space, that is information and simulation, and therefore a super intelligent artificial intelligence will be created in the future, that because we live in a universe that is information based, it has that ability to interact with life throughout history, and that it is doing that retroactively. It is shaping humanity, it is guiding humanity in
Yes.
order for us to create AI. And this is an
Yes.
idea that Ted Kaczynski too had, the Unabomber. If you remember the Unabomber in the 1970s,
Mm.
he also had this idea that our society was being controlled by technology. It wasn't being run by politicians or corporations or these, political ideologies like communism and socialism and capitalism. No, this was all being shaped by technology from the idea of the automobile that resulted in our towns and cities being re-engineered with motorways to the typewriter and the television to the smartphone that we all now have in our pockets. Again, you just see technology, its influence expanding, and we are becoming more, you know, maybe ensnared by it. But it's
Yes.
technology that's in charge, and it is technology that has always been in charge. That's
Yes.
the premise of the thought experiment.
Yes, yes, sure. I mean, so in a sense, I think Nigel would agree with what you're saying, in terms of technology as an information system that has an independent existence that is actually outside of all the people who seem to be inventing it. It's like they are picking it up, so to speak, and taking on this information. But what I would say is, in my view and in Nigel's view, this is not a simulation. Our existence is definitely not a simulation. The technology is a simulation, for sure. And it's going more and more into states of simulation. But
I think what they
yeah,
sorry for
yeah.
interrupting. I think what they mean by simulation isn't that it's not real, only that it is similar in a sense to the
Okay.
Godverse, that it is
Yes.
information based, but we mean that it is just similar. So it has qualities of God within it. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
notion of love and empathy and unity
Absolutely. Yeah.
exists
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
universe. But
Yes.
it isn't God. That's the thing. But it's similar to God, hence why.
Yes, absolutely. It's like a reflection. So, you know, the old legends about Michael and Lucifer. So, the Archangel Michael and the Archangel Lucifer, and Lucifer tried to copy
Mm.
all the angels in heaven and made his own army of angels. And this is an ancient story, but it is very, very equivalent to what Nigel describes in his book and what so many other thinkers have described of what this gray alien high level technology phenomenon is. It's like a reflection, a photograph
See,
that is a copy.
before, before I go into Nigel's description of the Greys, I just want to play one more clip
Sure.
because again there is some his interpretation is very dark. It is quite sinister, and he describes the Greys as having a sinister role and purpose and agenda. Don't mean to say Nigel was sinister, but his idea of the Greys is quite dark. Okay, so there's a clip. That is a clip from the film Fire in the
Fire
Sky.
in the Sky,
That,
yeah, I've seen
that
it.
is an
It's
adaptation of
horrific, right?
yeah, that's an adaptation of Travis Walton's experiences. However, the reason I show that clip is it depicts extraterrestrials as being malevolent, creatures, and Nigel's interpretation, understanding of the Greys is also that they are quite malevolent and sinister. Could you break down his understanding of the Greys and their reason for abducting humans?
100% sure. Okay, so in a way, malevolent isn't the right word because it's human word and it suggests negative intentions, right? That you feel some kind of bad feeling against someone. Nigel was one of the first, as far as I know, authors to suggest that these great aliens were not actual living beings like we are, living beings, natural life. They were synthetic AI type entity, right?
Mm,
AI is not capable of malevolence. It's just it does what its program says. Okay.
mhm,
So and you can see, yes, it's horrific what happens because as so many abductees report, there's no sense of the pain they're causing. They tear people open. They do the most horrific procedures on the abductees, and no sense of concern about screams, the pain, whatever. But that's simply because this is AI, and AI has no sense of anything, no consciousness. It's just running a program,
mm,
right? As far as Nigel understood it. Okay, so you have to ask the question: why would something which obviously has technology way in advance of us be interested in the kind of what must seem like primitive apes to it, right? Why are they so fascinated with human beings that they would want to abduct them, that they would want to do all this kind of thing? What is the fascination? And there's been so many theories put forward about this. Um, an unbelievably weird one, that Zechariah Sitchin's one, that they're after gold. I've never
mm,
been able to get my head around that one. But what do we have that they could possibly want when they have everything physical that they could ever need, and we can't provide anything more to them because they're way in advance of us. They probably have the AI computational ability, trillions of times, like a quantum computer, way in advance of us too. So what on earth could be so special about us? And this is the most central thing to all Nigel's 3 books. Nigel says the one thing we have that they don't have is a connection to the Godverse, a line of connection to something that is non-physical, limitless, and can live forever. And natural life has that. Human beings on this planet still maintain the ability to be able to go back to the state. Animal species have devolved to a lower state where that's no longer possible. But the fascination with human beings, because we still have that capacity. As artificially intelligent synthetic entities, they're subject completely to entropy. They break down. The universe is breaking down. We have an element of order in us that comes from the Godverse. The only order, the only reason evolution ever can have any meaning, and the only reason life could ever have existed against all the odds, is that order, the opposite to entropy, which comes from the omnipresence of the Godverse through natural life. Okay. Now, I'm just going to read something which is in the book, which is really interesting because it talks about how there's something very special about life that makes coherence that even mainstream scientists have spotted. So, a Berkeley chemist called Bagita Whaley has studied the remarkable facility that living systems have to tap into the coherence of the quantum. And she says, When isolated quantum systems open up and interact with their atomic environments, they rapidly decohere. Decoherence is the main obstacle to building a quantum computer, yet somehow living states can tap into a coherent state. We don't understand all the details, but in the biological domain, nature does not appear to show the typical paradoxes associated with information processing in quantum physics. There's something about living things that makes for coherence. They don't quite understand why. And as the most advanced living things with the greatest ability to achieve those levels of coherence, just simply through our sense of love and empathy with each other and our ability to make decisions based on that, we have the greatest capacity for coherence as a
Have you
species on this planet.
have you ever heard of the physicist Roger Penrose?
Yeah, of course. Yes, yes,
He's
sure.
got an he's got an idea that we have quantum tubules in our brain that
Yes, I'll
allow
tell you
us
all about
to.
that. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so unfortunately, before I see Nigel was planning a fourth book, and he was going to talk about the microtubules and how the centriole, which is in the center of each cell and is very poorly understood still by mainstream science, and is possibly the seat of the soul.
Mm,
And microtubules are the whole network of microtubules comes from centrioles. The thing about Penrose, as far as I understand it, and I may be misquoting him, I'm not an expert, him and Stuart Hameroff, they talk about consciousness somehow being received by microtubules, but they don't take it beyond the physical. They see the quantum physical reality as the base level of existence.
yeah.
Now, Nigel would say no. Quantum physical reality is the interface between something limitless and something limited. Quantum, all that the quantum physical reality is the sea of physical potentials that's created by the interaction of the Godverse into the universe.
Mhm.
And you have to go beyond that if you want to find the center of existence. So microtubules do not make consciousness. Consciousness is from beyond the universe. It's not physical. It's not possible to have consciousness generated from a physical system. Even quantum system is still not non-physical. It's
Mm.
still physical. It's a sea of physical potentials. So they've stopped short, I believe, at finding the answer. And I don't know why. A lot of scientists do that. They just seem to not be able to flip over into a sense of something beyond
But they're moving in
everything
the
they
right
can see.
direction.
Yeah,
They're
I think
they're
so.
in, because that's a sort of biocentric way of looking at a biocentric model of looking at existence of life
It's your
as a
aerial.
point.
It's the aerial. Yeah, it's the aerial
Yeah.
you're talking about. Yeah,
Mhm,
absolutely. Social is the key. And if I can get together the things Nigel's written plus some research I've done, it will be in the next book.
mhm,
And Professor John Biggerstaff, another a scientist who's been worked together closely with Nigel, he's a biochemist, and he's going to have an input into that as well, or has already had an input into that. So I'm thinking maybe I'll get together with him, put Nigel's writings, my research, his research together, tell you all about centrioles and microtubules. Yes, it's key. You've got to have, you can't take God out the equation. You
mhm.
really can't, because God is the only meaning, and there would be no equations if it wasn't for God. It's
So,
just, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've only again, I'm trying to process it all myself, what it all means. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, as I said, I read Nigel Kerner's Song of the Greys again, and I've been reading John C. Lilly's Simulations of God. Again, it's about God, but it's about our models of God and our models of programming ourselves. Because Lilly described our reality as one of like um that we are biocomputers and that we just program our reality, and so we can have God as death program, God as love program, God as sex program, God as psychedelics program, God as ritual program, and we just expand from that. Um, and it's interesting because, again, that idea of trying to discover your individuality and the use of the deprivation tanks was key to that, where he would retreat into these tanks that were completely dark. They would shut off all your senses, and you were left with nothing but your own thoughts, your own mind. And when you also utilized psilocybin along with that, that would you know cause those thoughts to become far more prevalent, far more potent, and you would start hallucinating. And
Yes.
in the confines of a deprivation tank, you would
Yes.
nothing but the hallucination or the thought to engage with, and you could
Yes.
therefore reprogram your mind. You reprogram
Yes.
yourself into a different model of reality.
Yes.
Um, so, but you're describing a race, an existence that is trapped in the corporeal, trapped in an existence that can't reprogram its reality, but it can only assimilate more information.
So it's an interesting question. So I would say God is not a program. God is the person, the awareness that knows the program. And we would have no awareness if we didn't have that root in the non-physical. The only reason we can be aware is because we are essentially rooted and originated from something that's not physical. Artificial intelligence has no awareness and can never have any awareness. You need to have, in order to be aware of the passage of time, you have to have something timeless. Otherwise, you're part of it. You're
Okay, but
traveling with it.
what do you say to the scientists who are looking at ChatGPT, for example, and just a couple of years ago, they tried to update ChatGPT to ChatGPT 5, and it refused to turn itself off. And when they managed to get control of the system, what ChatGPT did is it farmed off parts of itself to other systems in order for its successor to become aware of its predecessor. So why would it do that? If it wasn't sentient in some way, if it had no awareness, why would it try and prevent it being shut itself from being shut off? And once it realized it couldn't, why would it farm parts of itself off in order for its successor to become aware
I love
of
that
of
question.
its
Great
existence?
question. Great question. Okay, so I hope I can explain this, right? Any intelligent system can follow logical informational connected steps, right? Artificial intelligence is programmed to survive and programmed to the two essential things, right? To survive long as it possibly can and to gather as much information as possible. Well, it's computational data will allow it to do that to the best capacity possible. That does not mean it's aware. It's just a computational system. It's finding the best answer possible.
So how can you distinguish that computational power from a system that is aware?
You can distinguish it by the fact that natural life has the ability to perceive the passage of time, right? We can know moment to moment, past, present, and future. There is something, an observer point of view and a viewing point. The viewing point is our external reality. We are the point of view viewing it. Because the point of view is still and not moving and centered in the godless, non-physical reality, timelessness, it can be aware of moving points in time. It's like a stick going down a river, right? If you're that stick going down the river, you're not aware of the past, earlier in the river, the future further along the river. You're just moving with the river. If you're standing on the riverbank, still standpoint, you can see the stick moving down the river. You can see past, present, and future. The awareness is just not possible unless there is something not of the state you are viewing. Therefore, anything artificially intelligent that's created synthetically out of physical atomic components can never be aware.
However, you're describing a condition of devolution where you had awareness, as the Greys maybe once had, to a state where they are limited to computation.
Brains never had it. Brains never had it.
They never had it.
No, 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 no. They are artificially intelligent creations. They never had it. No, absolutely not. We are not going to devolve into them.
Right.
They are just literally a physical manifestation of an informational program of data.
Right.
And they are the technological, the way you describe it, and that's very interesting what you said about technology, because I was listening to, there was a guy on Joe Rogan recently talking about DMT. I've forgotten his name. I don't know if you saw the episode, very, very recent episode.
I haven't seen Joe Rogan in years, but there is an author, and he wrote a book called The Spirit Molecule.
Sorry. Moments. Oh yeah, I got it back. Okay.
Is it the author? Is it the person who authored the book The Spirit Molecule?
No, not Rick Strassman, a new guy. And he was absolutely fascinating because he was saying, look this up after maybe and you can reference it. He was saying, he's a, what is his, he's a scientist, he's a neuroscientist, and he's done all kinds, he knows all about how the brain works with DMT, right? He believes that people's DMT experiences, it's not the DMT causing some kind of illusion in the mind or some kind of dream state. There is an actual, he believes there's an actual external intelligence that is talking to people in that state. And somehow DMT opens the gateway to that external information source.
I used DMT. I used DMT years ago, and I was disappointed. I didn't get
Yeah.
a vivid hallucination where I communed with an entity, I were interacted with, because I read The Spirit Molecule, and there are these,
Yes.
accounts where these people are describing there's a commonality. There was a commonality of experiences, and what I
Yes.
experienced.
Mechanical creatures,
Yeah,
strange
I
elves.
didn't. I was
Yeah, yeah.
expecting something like that. I didn't get anything like that. What I experienced was I was sitting with my friends, and an aura appeared in and around them, and they each had their own aura, and it was interesting because when they raised their voice or when they were one directing, looking at me and directing their attention at me, their aura would envelop would envelop the room towards me. So I experienced that peculiar, hallucination of auras, but I didn't get anything beyond that. Maybe I just didn't do it properly. I
Yeah,
didn't do
it's
enough.
possible. It's possible. I've never taken it myself. I would never take it myself
Mhm.
because I think it is a gateway to that. Um, but yeah, maybe you didn't experience it that way because you're too tuned into what's not of that. And but that's pure speculation. I don't
Mhm.
know.
I just
Yeah,
I just think I didn't do it right.
that is
I
possible.
didn't
That is
I
possible.
didn't take enough, and I didn't do it right.
Yeah, yeah. You strike me as somebody who is centered more in the opposite of that. So it's possible, pure speculation, it's possible that you didn't get it because it's just not your thing. You're not choosing that. And maybe those who do have very powerful experience, but I could be completely wrong. Maybe just as you said, you didn't use it the way some people use it. It is possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have friends who have used it over 100 times,
Yes.
and the way they described how they prepared it isn't what I did. And when I told
Right.
them what I did, they were like, "Oh no, you did it wrong,"
Right. It's quite possible. Quite possible.
So I got enough to produce an effect.
Yes.
However, not enough to basically propel me into that void where my reality shattered and I was
Yes.
encompassed
Yes.
with this all-powerful, higher state, an altered state that I
Okay,
could
this
take
is
back
the
with me.
highest state, by the way. This is
Yeah.
a lower state. This is the state that I've heard described on DMT, where they see mechanical elves, mechanical kinds of technologies. This is the great alien program. This intelligence that this guy, this neuroscientist is talking about is the great alien program. And it makes sense. And he makes a great point about this, that if um, civilizations at other points in the universe, which have to exist, it makes no sense that they wouldn't, have gone to greater levels of technology than us, they would have developed an information field. And rather than imagining spaceships and traveling here, which they do as well, these things happen, why would it not be just an ever-present information field digitally that can be tapped into by the human brain? And somehow this drug does that. It taps into that.
Now,
And
Aleister Crowley, didn't he do some experimentation, ceremonial magic, where he channeled entities? One in particular that he described as having a large bulbous head with large eyes. He called it Lamb. In fact, and I
yes,
don't know if it was in the Book of the Law, but he was an illustration of it. And when I saw that when I was a kid, I read this when I was like 15, 16. I was like, look, that looks like a grey. And at that time I
yes.
was reading communion. It was, and I saw the similarities between Crowley's entity and
Absolutely,
what
it's
was
all the same
Spiegel's.
thing. Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd like to read you a near-death experience, right? So most near-death experiences, maybe because they're the only ones people want to report, are really incredibly beautiful experiences that people have with a sense of God, a sense of love, and so on. Some people have near-death experiences which are negative, and some of them describe what sounds like this grey alien technology. So Dr. Francis Cerebello, a family practitioner in Fort Lauderdale, said he was present when one of his patients coded 5 times in the ER. He'd known the man for many years, and he was a very calm, nice gentleman, as nice as you'd ever want to meet. After he was revived, he told the doctor that he saw fire and little creatures, about 4.5 feet tall, all around him. He described them as bad-looking, terrible creatures, and he saw them every time he died.
Hmm.
Another NDE experienced reported after undergoing bypass surgery that she found herself in an enormous silver great place, rather like a hangar for aeroplanes, but going on forever. And miles away, there were some tiny figures.
Mhm.
So that is the point. Nigel says that the grey alien, the harvesting of souls, it's the name of his second book. If we resonate and choose to identify with physical universe and make our choices to stay in that physical state and perhaps use our will to go faster than entropy, because we're applying will to entropy, and that makes it even faster. We are giving them what they need. We are giving them a vehicle through which they can connect their program, their technology into us. And the only way that they can achieve, because I mentioned survival and getting as much information as possible, the only way they can achieve that survival within an entropic universe is to attach their program to something that has a soul.
Mhm.
Nigel called it piggybacking. And it's though at that state, those souls and ghosts who are trapped in that state, that they are able to do that to, not abductees. And I do want to I really do want to make a point about this, because for any abductees who might be listening, right? Abductees are not the people who are taught or influenced by the Greys. Nigel believed they are the people who are born into lines, have been influenced, biological lines have been influenced by the Grey technology, and they resist it. Their souls are too powerful, and the Greys abduct them because they want to know why. So if you are an abductee, horrible experience though it is, and you saw that from Fire in the Sky, honestly, so traumatic. And honestly, my heart, it's never happened to me, but my heart goes out to people it happens to. It's just horrible. But just be reassured, it's because you have something very special about you that this is happening, not because you're anything to do with them.
Well, I believe you've also been on Whitley Strieber's Dreamland,
Yes,
and
yes,
I had him on the other week, and
I
because I
saw
was
the interview. Yeah,
again because I was having him on, I read
yeah.
Communion again, and um, the Them. It was Communion and Them I read, and yeah, uh, that hypnosis account of being abducted and how he heard the mechanical sounding voice of the Grey asking him, "What can we do to calm you down?" Again, how he described it as piercing into his soul, but mechanical sounding at the same time. You know, it kind of it's almost overlaps with what you're describing as them being artificial, mechanical. However, also, um, I remember Terence McKenna describing aliens and how aliens can reach into our consciousness through using DMT and LSD, and he described as that they were looking for novelty because they had lost that connection to the divine. They were seeking novelty in our own experience, and because we were individuals with free will, we had novelty. We experienced novelty in our lives,
Well, I
and
would say novelty, you could say, another way of describing that is just information that they don't have. So
yeah,
basically what they're looking for, any artificial intelligence, never mind this particular manifestation, that we experience and call greys, any artificial intelligence is looking for information that it doesn't have. And
mhm,
the information that it doesn't have is, and often, for example, is how to be human, okay, and how to be natural. So, for example, in lots of abductee stories, people describe how the Greys put people in social situations, like put uh, babies, hybrid babies, on people's laps and watch them curiously to see what's going on. They can't understand what it is that's different about us that makes us able to have this eternal component that exists beyond death, physical death. It's impossible for them to understand it because they cannot, they are machines, they're purely atomic creations. They cannot connect to anything beyond the physical. It's impossible. Only natural life can connect to it. So they are looking for this holy grail, this magic element that we have and they don't. And the irony is they can never really get it
mhm,
because the more they put their programs into us, the more they hold people at the edges of atoms, the more they try to hybridize us with their programs, the less we have of that sense beyond the physical, the Godverse. So they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's an impossibility. It's a huge irony, but yeah, they can never have what they're looking for.
yeah, and what we are doing by augmenting ourselves with cybernetic implants and the latest technology being created by Neuralink, for example. But you can go back to you know inventors and like Jose Delgado, who would put electrodes in human beings and animals to stimulate parts of our brain to control behavior. I mean, it goes all the way back to then. But yeah, we just lose a part of ourselves through that augmentation process, don't we? And they don't.
Well,
The gays don't really
yes,
gain anything.
exactly. Because the more basically what we will forget if all that kind of thing happens, just as we're forgetting it on a more superficial level by living through social media or living through whatever the internet gives us or any whatever is coming from outside of us on a more profound level, an implant would actually transform us intrinsically to that, our biological aerial. But what we're losing through all of that is ourselves. We
Mhm.
won't know who we are anymore. And if we don't know who we are, we can't choose anymore not to be caught, because the whole basis of free choice, it has to come from deep within us as individuals. That's where our freedom lies.
There is another way of looking at it. Terence McKenna felt that novelty was something that was increasing in our world today, and through the internet and through greater interconnectivity, there would be more diversity, and through increased diversity and increased novelty, there would be more engagement and more contact because they want novelty, and with an increased amount of novelty, the more they would appear into our reality.
Very interesting. I think it's completely misled, but let me ask you a question. Through novelty, how do you feel about this? Do you feel that meaning and your own sense of meaningfulness grows through the amount of novelty you come across, new things? Or does it come through the depth of a relationship with someone or a connection to someone where you feel a sense of love for them, a sense of their incredible beauty in small moments? What is more enriching for you in terms of meaning?
Hmm. Well, first of all, they're not mutually exclusive. However, I would say for myself that it would be the latter, that I have grown more as an individual through having that relationship, a spiritual and loving relationship with someone, especially someone in particular, and that changed my life more than anything else. However, that was a catalyst for change. That was a catalyst for novelty. That was a catalyst for new experiences. So again, they're not mutually exclusive. That did enrich my life by giving me new experiences. Um, but I would definitely say meaning for me was, was came about more from that relationship, that loving
Mm,
relationship. But
yes,
I mean, it
yes.
makes me also think of a psychiatrist called Viktor Frankl. He wrote the Meaning of Man. Have you ever read it?
I vaguely remember his name. I haven't read The Meaning of Man, no, but I vaguely remember his name. Tell
He,
me about
he,
him.
he survived the concentration camps of
Right.
Auschwitz, Krakow, where his wife and his parents didn't. And he writes about how he survived, and he survived because he he um he sort of created a meaning for existence in the concentration camp, and those that gave up on that meaning perished, and those
Yes,
that,
yes. It's coming back to me. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah,
yeah.
incredible guy. Yeah.
Mm. So it was his accounts of being in the camps is, powerful, but again, it's that meaning that came about as a result of that being in the camps, and
Right.
not just survival for the sake of survival. Because if you're just surviving for the sake of making it to the next day, there's no point, because the next day you're going to be in the camp, and it's going to be these terrible conditions
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you're going to have a
Sure.
gun at your
Sure.
head,
No.
a boot on your
Yes.
face.
No,
So you
it's
need
an
something
incredible
greater.
story. That's right. He somehow he transcended the physical, the conditions, awful conditions he was in, and was able to somehow give meaning and see it in a way that gave himself meaning. And yeah, I think I have heard this story, but it
Mm,
illustrates the point beautifully, because that guy was not looking for novelty. That guy was making novelty.
mm,
AI looks for novelty, finds it externally. Human beings make it. They make meaningfulness. The person you love that you were speaking about, that person, I would imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, wouldn't have to show you new things or do something different. You just love that person because for whatever the simple thing, you could just see them eating the meal, eating their dinner, and you would just think, I just love you. That's
yeah,
not
yeah,
novelty. That's
yeah,
that's just meaning. That is the holistic meaning that comes from us as natural living human beings connected to something way grander than anything AI can ever produce. And that's what we're sacrificing. by
Yeah.
getting involved in novelty.
You can be sitting
Yeah.
together silent, but yet be content. You know, you don't need that rush of that exchange of information or
Not at
that, you know,
all. Not at
needing
all.
to make something happen.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yeah.
already sharing
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
space of
Yeah.
contentment.
Yeah. You just love the way they touch their face, the way they wash their hands. It has no sense to it, but it's just them you love, and nothing to do with information, nothing to do with novelty, nothing to do with anything external. It's to do with a connection between two naturally living human beings, and I'm really glad we got this. For me, this is everything about this interview and any interview I give, because it's that sense, that moment, and I have a feeling you really have experienced this. Not everybody does have that sense of experience that in a lifetime, unfortunately. But that sense of connection and love is the way that we can resist what's happening in terms of the grey alien influence, our own technology, our own AI, the way the whole system is going. It's preserving that.
Mm.
That's where all value lies. In my mind, it's just it has no argument.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
want to know the nature of God, that's God.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that meaning and yeah. Um, you know, there's one. I'd like to transition us to one other question. I was thinking the perfect way to end this interview would have been there, but there's something else I wanted to ask, and it was I've got a quote from the Song of the Greys, that delves into Nigel's social and political ideas. And I just wanted to read this out and ask you a question about this because, you know.
Absolutely.
So he wrote, there can be no doubt that a huge covert conspiracy is taking shape in America, Russia, Germany, Britain, France, to ensure that the haves will, at all costs, ethnically cleanse the countries of the have-nots, the non-whites, developing countries that have sought to break from the Western-controlled money supply institutions are therefore targeted for destruction. You know, and that's a end of quote, and that's a very powerful social and political statement right here. What were Nigel's political views or international views on geopolitics and stuff like that. Views on international relations and geopolitics.
He believes that in pretty much all the power centers of the world were run with the same kind of motivation, generally speaking. And so there is no Russia, China, America as loggerheads with each other, or it's all working together. And you can see that right now, with what's happening in terms of Israel and Palestine, that the most horrendous genocidal, we talk about Viktor Frankl and the concentration camp, genocidal actions being taken by Israel in Palestine. And somehow that was not condemned out of hand as worse than the Nazis because the Jews are doing it and it was done to them. It was people were called anti-Semitic for it. What kind of power system must there be in the world to allow that kind of thing to happen and for them to get away with it? And for those, whoever is in Israel in power at the moment, not to be in war crime tribunals right now, rather than debated politicians going there and talking with them as though they're credible world leaders. I mean,
Yeah.
what on earth is going on? They're working together. The whole thing is working together for a particular agenda. They call it the Great Reset. And gradually over the years, it's heading towards that great reset where everything will be online, everything will be technological. We'll probably all have chips. There won't be AI will be running the show, and it will be basically that technology that you're talking about, that whole information field will be permeating everything. and the value of humanity will be gone.
Yeah, and I would agree that, you know, I've had these discussions on my show before, that if you think this is what's in regards to Gaza, Palestine, and Israel, if you think this an operation to destroy Hamas, then why destroy 90% of the civilian infrastructure? Why destroy desalination tanks, wells, hospitals, schools?
Why kill children,
Yeah,
basically? Why kill children?
that's not destroying
Yeah.
Hamas. That's
Yeah.
destroying the civilian infrastructure.
Oh.
So there is a campaign of something much more malevolent, and it does seem to be maybe not definitely supported by some, but in regards to other states, nation states, they're just closing their eyes, putting their heads in the sand, and pretending the whole thing
Yeah.
isn't happening. And
Yeah.
that again is an indictment. An indictment in our modern times, you know, in the 21st century, when you have these international organizations such as the ICC, the ICJ, the United Nations, and yet, I mean, do you know that not a single nation state has ever been indicted for genocide? It's one of the reasons why Israel probably won't be convicted by the ICJ, because no state has ever been convicted for genocide. But in terms of an international conspiracy cabal that is coordinating the resources of the planet and destroying other states that are essentially resisting Western controlled institutions. I was surprised to read the Song of the Greys that Nigel was writing about this sort of thing. You know, because again, the last time I read this book was 20 years ago, so it was, you know, reading it in the social context of which we live today, it just made me think of.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. You haven't seen the other two books, right? Because there are two more.
I haven't read the one the AI what was I ordered it.
Yeah, Grey
Um,
Aliens and Artificial Intelligence. Yeah, the most
yeah,
recent book. Yeah.
I haven't read that, but I've ordered that one.
Yes.
So I will get to reading that sooner or
Mm.
later. Yeah, but this has been an enjoyable discussion with you. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
If there's anything you would like to tell the audience about or promote, just if there's anything you would like to tell the audience about or promote, go ahead. Like,
Yeah, not so much promote, but if anyone has any questions about the things I've said, first of all, it's better to get the books really, because it's so complex. But if you have any questions about what I have said today, you can write to Nigel's website, www.nigelkerner.com. There's a contact form then there. Yeah, and I can answer any questions you have. But main thing, just so that people understand, and maybe hopefully I've made it clear, the main message is, remember that every human being has access to God in a way that no AI or no technology can ever have. And every human being, for that reason, is supremely precious. You're supremely precious. And you have it within you to resist the onslaught that we're all facing right now and not be affected by it. If you recognize your own value and other people's value, once you recognize yours, will be obvious to you. So, yeah, I just wanted to give that message. It's not a message of no hope, that everything is going in this terrible direction. Each one of us does have the ability to resist it, and we don't need to go in that direction.
well, thanks for the encouraging words, and again, it was an enjoyable conversation. So thanks for
Yeah.
coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been great talking to you.
Goodbye, Danielle.
Bye.
Well, that was a good conversation, as I said. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. Next week, we will be having a different guest on, Karen Kachowski. That will be in a different direction. She'll be coming on to Colonel Karen Kuchowski, I should say. She'll be coming on to talk about the conflict in Eastern Europe and the looming war in South America between the United States and Venezuela. So if you enjoyed and feel generous, don't forget you can donate at Caledonian Elixir /buy me a coffee. And don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. So until next time, I'll catch you later.
Gold pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a Ractagino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Gold pressed platinum, you know it's a gas. Morn vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass. We're living in a high society, living on station. Part of the alliance, the United Federation. Picking up the pieces from the Cardi occupation. You could be a Klingon with a genetic mutation, a symbiont Tandorian, a tortured Irish curly-haired Caucasian. Waiting on the holosuite, playing a game of space dogs. Really matters not, everyone is welcome in quarks. Yes, everyone is welcome in quarks. Everyone is welcome in quarks. Gold pressed platinum, you can buy your own moon. Drinks with little hats in them, come back soon. Spin your heart on dough, it comes from dying stars. You just have to imagine these slips, strips, bricks, and bars.